Thank you for joining us again. If you joined yesterday, we are at day 2 of the CMMC Level 1 mock assessment, and this is going to be presented by Derrich Phillips with Aspire Cyber and his team. And I'll go ahead and let them take it away. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Lori. Good to be back for day 2. Okay, so start off with just an overview of the agenda. Yesterday, we gave a high-level overview of CMMC 101. Those of you who wasn't here yesterday, CMMC stands for the Cybersecurity and Maturity Model Certification, and it is specific for DoD contractors and subcontractors. For day 2, we're going to just do a high-level recap and really dive straight forward into the mock assessment for today. Yesterday, Alex, he demonstrated what it looks like to satisfy the CMMC Level 1 requirements using a managed service provider. So that cloud enclave, which was hosted in Google Workspace, and it pretty much was the easy button. So it's essentially like the vast majority of the requirements were inherited from either Google or the managed service provider. But today we're going to switch it up, and we're going to be doing a mock assessment for Allen Evans Systems. So you all can see an example of what it looks like for an organization that's not inheriting all of the requirements. And then that's how you're going to get that viewpoint. Day 3, we're going to recap day 2, and then we're going to do an out brief to let you know what the results are of the mock assessment. Remember, for this mock assessment, we're role playing. So we're just going to role play what the assessors would pretty much do for their final briefing or that organization that they assessed. And then we're going to spend the vast majority of time tomorrow focusing on the resources available to you for CMMC compliance. So those free resources, paid resources, we can talk costs, we can talk, it's pretty much going to be really open to talk about a lot of the resources available to you and the next steps. Making sure we're covering all your questions and make sure that you have a clear guidance on how to align your organization and get it CMMC Level 1 compliant. Okay, so if you were not here yesterday, I just want to quickly recap and make sure you understand the acronyms I'm going to be using, try to minimize them as much as I can. I already gave you the definition of what CMMC stands for. For CMMC Level 1, the biggest focus is federal contract information, so FI. And essentially, if you're a federal contractor, any information that you're receiving or producing in the performance of that contract is considered FCI if it's not intended for public release. So you have to satisfy you have to basically protect the confidentiality of that FCI per that FAR 52-204-21 clause. And that imposes those 15 requirements that are found in this SB 800-171, which map to CMMC level. For this training, we're not focusing on CUI, but just so you know what it means, it's controlled unclassified information. And then that's where you go from having to comply with 15 requirements to graduate to 110 requirements. So that'd be a workshop for another time. Next, for this workshop, all the focus on is FCI. Real quick, just some examples of FCI, that federal contract information. This list is not exhaustive, but at a very basic level, it could be just emails between you and the prime or the contracting officer. That can be information that's not intended for public release. Or it could even be RFP, part specifications, reports. A lot of things. You just want to make sure you first look at the contract, look what clauses are in your contract, and then understand what information you're receiving in performance of that contract, and also any information you're producing in performance of that contract, and identify whether it's falling into that FCI category. That's going to let you know what information, what systems, what people, facilities are in scope. So we're going to see more, you're going to see practical examples of that today during our mock assessment. And again, just the last part of we covered this yesterday, but again, if anyone's attending for the first time today, just want to make sure you have that baseline. So level 1, within CMMC, there's 3 levels. We're focusing on level 1, 15 requirements. And that's going to require an annual self-assessment, annual affirmation, a senior level official from that organization, that defense contractor or subcontractor. And this is available today within the SPURS system, where you can go in and submit your CMMC Level 1 self-assessment attestation. It's not a score for level 1 because you have to meet all 15 requirements. So it's basically met or not met. You're in compliance or you're not in compliance. And I shared a story yesterday where we had a client who had to demonstrate that they have already submitted their CMMC Level 1 self-attestation, and it was on file in SPURS in order to submit for a DoD. And CMMC is not even fully in effect yet, and that's all we're already seeing, those type of stipulations, whether from DoD or from primes. So it's really important. All right. And this is the team. We're not going to go through full introductions again, but these are the players. So they are, today it's going to be Evan and Alan, who are going to be representing the organization seeking assessment, so that defense contractor, and they're going to be representing Alan Evans Systems, and primarily Alex is going to be serving as the assessor. He's playing that role, and both myself and Alex are lead CCAs, so CMMC certified assessors. That means that we can lead CMMC Level 2 certification assessment teams for C3POs, the CMMC third-party assessment organizations who perform those Level 2 certifications. To date, I've served on 2 assessment teams for CMMC Level 2. All right, so enough of me. That's the overview, and let's jump into the actual assessment. I'll set the stage. As far as, let's say, I'm assuming the role of, I'm kind of more of the floater, the host, but we're setting the stage. I'm the executive for Alan Evans Systems, and I invited Alex from Aspire Cyber to come in and do an assessment of Alan Evans Systems to just make sure that ultimately Alan and Evan are doing what they're telling me they're doing their jobs, what I'm paying them for, and that we can confidently submit our CMMC Level 1 self-assessment attestation in SPURS and not have to worry about the DoD coming to audit us or fining us for false claims. So welcome, Alex. I guess you could take it from here and just kind of have Alan and Evan share with you a little more about their organization.
Can you tell me a little bit about your company?
Sure. Yeah. So the area of our organization that we're defining as our system here has to do with designing bridge rehab projects. And so what that means in this case is working on the federal contract information associated with a land bridge from an area of nature on one side of the highway to the area of nature on the other side of the highway. And it's a federal contract, so we just want to make sure that we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's for that.
Excellent. And a question I do like to ask to kind of understand how sensitive information flows throughout your environment is, how do you get this information into your environment? Is through like a share or email?
Yeah, good question. So a lot of times the way that we'll gain information is going into a portal provided by our prime. And then when we pull it into our environment, we're utilizing a tool because we're on our way to getting to CMMC Level 2. That's our intention. So we're utilizing a platform called Prevail, and Prevail provides encrypted storage, FIPS 140-2 if it matters to you, as well as encrypted email. And so we will pull in the information from a share into that environment if directed to do so. And if we receive information via email, we will have it flow into our Prevail system.
Excellent. Okay, so we're going to kind of just jump into the assessment. Derrich, do you mind having the proof on your screen while we go through it? Thank you. So Derrich is me at the same time. You know, this guy's good. All right, we're gonna start with the AC controls from the very top. Talking about how we identify authorized users. How do you guys do that?
Alan, do you want me to talk to that? Speak to that?
Yeah, that'd be good.
Cool. All right. So I think it's important. It's funny, I'm already taking off my hat. So there's multiple systems we're going to be talking about here. So I think that if you're in our position, mine and Alan's position, and you're answering these questions, just keep in mind that you're going to want to speak to any systems in which you have FCI flowing. And so I'll speak to both of them. And so we identify users based on our local Active Directory and use role-based access control for any kind of user accounts on workstations. If we're talking about the accounts that are in Prevail, That is a locally managed list of users that we manage directly in the Prevail platform. And those are easily identified because an administrator in that environment needs to set up or decommission those users.
Excellent. So in that situation, they would show me a screenshot or something of that, just so you guys know. It would be in the evidence and CMMC proof that you guys are going to find very useful. Let's move to the next one. As far as processes, which services or automation accounts run on behalf of users, and do you have them documented somewhere?
We do, yeah. So for the purposes of our audit, since our local servers are not doing any storing, processing, transmitting of FCI, the area we'll talk about here is our local workstations for our users who are accessing the enclave, as well as the enclave itself. So the enclave itself is managed by the Prevail team, and we inherit that control. There's no processes running in that environment that wouldn't be approved already by their level of certification as FedRAMP modern equivalent. And then on our own workstations, we're utilizing a tool called Threat Locker, which is an application and process allow listing tool. And so what that does is it goes through a training period in which it learns about all the applications and processes running on the machine. And then once we go through that training period and approve everything, we then lock it down so that nothing that's not in the approved list can run on the workstation unless it's requested by the user on the machine and then given access from an administrator in the Threat Locker portal.
All right. And he would show me a screenshot of that too. So just another piece of advice, it's good to know this stuff, have it in documented, like he says, and then also I have another piece, like a screenshot to prove it, and that'll save you a lot of time during assessment. So Thanks. You actually answered B and C because he brought in Threat Locker into it and how they're identified. So we can just kind of jump down. Let's kind of answer this too, but let's just get a little bit more meat to it. As far as on D, do you have any settings or control blocks for logging in to non-authorized users? And how do you control that?
On a workstation level, that's controlled through the role-based access. And so each workstation is protected with multi-factor authentication and username password. So the multi-factor authentication in this case is going to be Windows Hello. But that protects authorized users from a workstation level. And then once those users are authorized there, this is another thing for the wider group. It's not enough for me to say about the workstations. I also have to speak about accessing the platform, Prevail. And so, because it's two different systems really that gain access from one to the other. So Prevail is inaccessible unless you are logged into the workstation on which the Prevail certificate is added. So Prevail is a passwordless system that only gains access for that user from that device on which the certificate is installed. And so once they've logged into their workstation with the multi-factor authentication, then a second multi-factor authentication based on the device itself and the certificate installed on it gives them access to Prevail from there.
Excellent. Thank you. How do you limit processes acting on behalf of authorized users?
That's going to be a Threat Locker thing as well. So this process that I described for application control is also process control.
Right. That's correct. How do you limit system access for authorized devices, including other systems?
Certificate-based access. Each device that is able to gain access to Prevail must be installed by an administrator. And there's a setting in Prevail that we've turned on that only allows one device per person. So it's a 1-to-1 ratio. You have one computer with one certificate on it, and that's the only device that you can connect to the Prevail environment from.
Perfect. So in assessment, I would ask to see that setting. That would just cover him on that. Okay.
And real quick for the audience, at the end of each domain, there are 6 total domains we'll try to cover today. I'll do a poll to ask you if you feel that based on Evan and Alan's responses that they met the requirements. Just to recap from yesterday, this is the requirement itself, but what the assessor is looking for is the assessment objective. So if you're doing your self-assessment, you need to address these assessment objectives. Each assessment objective has to be met in order for that requirement to be met. So let's say Evan provided adequate responses for 5 of these 6 assessment objectives. And if one was marked as not met by Alex, now that entire requirement is not met. This is really important to understand.
Yep.
Back to you, Alex.
All right. Let's see how we want to ask this question. Where do you define each role's allowed actions for like read, update, admin? But let me ask this in another way. This one is
Sure.
asking the types of transactions and functions that are authorized for users and are permitted to execute. So with that, how do you determine what is authorized or permitted by users for execution? How do you define that?
For sure. So the most traditional way that one would do that, like CRUD, create, read, update, destroy, from if you're like a programmer, is you can give access on a workstation in Active Directory with role-based access control. And so we do set user roles at that level. Your most common ones are standard, administrator, and then there's a lot of other options too. But we also utilize Threat Locker to control that as well. And we like Threat Locker in addition to Active Directory just because Threat Locker has really helpful audit logging. Not that Active Directory doesn't, but Threat Locker has a really nice place for us to be able to review those logs as we continue on our journey to level 2.
All right. And how often do you review those logs?
We review those logs, well, in real time as these things come through, but also weekly in our maintenance plan.
Perfect. So he says, he covered who does it, which is Threat Locker, and it's real time. So that checks a lot of boxes there. Right, where are we at?
And I guess I should extend that too. As it extends to Prevail, all processes within the Prevail environment are unmanageable by us. We can only create, read, update, destroy based on permissions that we have access to that our administrators provide to us. And then anything beyond that in the platform is managed by the organization Prevail themselves.
Excellent. So we started with users. So the same thing with a question, I guess, will apply to system access as well. How would you handle that?
How would we handle access to the system, i.e. the laptop and or the Prevail environment?
So you'd be able to show proof through either a log or screenshot of that being enforced, correct?
Yeah. And what I would also do is it's probably going to be represented by the same setting we talked about earlier, but in the Prevail dashboard, the one that indicates that only a machine with a certificate from that user is allowed to access the environment from that user's workstation.
Exactly. So don't be afraid to, reproduce the same evidence or map back to it during an assessment. So
I saw a quick question that I can just answer real quick. So CRUD is create, read, update, destroy. And it's an old school programming term about permissions. I don't know if people still use it. It's just how I remember things.
I know a lot of SQL people love that one. All right. So I believe we're in the next section. We met in the last one on both of them. Transactions. I think we're good on that. Okay, where are we at? External connections. Okay, perfect. All right. This one says connections to external systems are identified. How do you identify connections to external systems?
Alan, are you still with us? Because I feel like because of your relationship to the firewall from a local environment, that might be something helpful to talk about. From Prevail, that's an easy thing to answer. Prevail doesn't allow access to other local systems from them. There's only inbound connections from certificate approved machines. But Alan works on our local environment with the firewall, so maybe you can speak to that.
Well, I mean, if you're answering it from a Prevail standpoint, I think it's fine. All approved external connections are documented, right? What artifacts that we actually present to prove that, maybe some network diagrams and asset inventories and some SSP references.
Okay. Definitely. Those settings would cover that. And
I would actually toss it back to Evan if you could dive a little bit more into the Prevail side of it.
Yeah, well, think about it like this. Like, in some ways, Prevail is the external system from our organization, right? And so we say the connection from our organization to external systems that store, process, manage, store, process, transmit, FCI in this case, the only one that's identified and allowed is Prevail. Then if you speak from now you are Prevail, what external systems are you allowed to connect to? Well, the only external systems you're allowed to connect to are the workstations that have a certificate that allows you to connect to them, and that's it, right? So like it's a closed loop from that perspective. Prevail doesn't and can't connect to any other external systems besides the ones that we have with our certificate.
And for secure file storage?
Same thing. So Prevail represents our secure file storage. I'll do like a lateral step for everybody, but also for the auditor here. It would be helpful for me to describe the platform of Prevail. So Prevail is something that provides a FedRAMP equivalent environment for secure document storage, sharing, as well as email transmission and storage. And the solution represents something that an organization of our size can utilize in conjunction with some more traditional email platform like Microsoft 365 Commercial and still achieve the goals associated with encrypted email in particular, as well as storage that at level 2 would require 140-2 encrypted modules. So since we're on our way to that level of compliance, we've chosen to adopt Prevail.
And typically in an some assessors would go through and ask the rest of the questions here, but me, in this save some time, he's actually answered a lot of these, like how are connections verified, same settings, how are they limited, configuration settings he mentioned, and it is the actual external device. So that covers the next all the way through the F, actually. So
Yeah.
I'm not, so we're running out of time, you know, so we
Yeah.
have time. I'm not going to waste
Absolutely, yeah. And for sake of time, you don't have to go through each one. And I'm no longer marking as met or not met just because I'm going to put a poll at the end of this domain. And I want the audience to decide based on the responses. But this is a really good one to illustrate that CMMC level 1 is not easy. This is typically you're going to accomplish this function using a firewall or some type of technical solution, and you need to have those external connections documented to your system that's processing, storing, and transmitting FCI. So this is not a give me when it comes to CMMC level 1 compliance. This is one that illustrates that. So if you are a federal contractor today, and likely you have that FAR clause in your contract, you're handling FCI, and you can't identify your external systems, and you don't, then you're really not in compliance with this requirement right here.
To your point, Derrich, and to your point, Evan, when you're sitting there with the assessor, you want to make sure you have the right. So you want to have someone that actually can walk through your network diagram and your external systems and clearly define what those connections are.
Yep, absolutely. Connections are controlled and limited. So not only are they identified, but now they're controlled and limited. So that's likely going to be a technical control. So how are you controlling external connections from your system? So let's say you have a local area network, people working at the office. How are you controlling whether they're accessing from their work system, if they're accessing their own personal Google Drive or OneDrive or other systems that are external to your corporate system that they could potentially exfiltrate FCI to? So those are, this really shines a light on that with this one. All right. So this is the last requirement for level 1 for access control. So we touched on this yesterday. Alex did share an example of his procedure for this one. But let's get back to let's see how Allen Evans systems are handling this one.
Yeah, and okay, go ahead, Evan.
No. You speak, please.
Oh, I was going to say that I have to be familiar with Prevail, but if they weren't using a tool like that, I'll be asking, well, if you have a protected hard drive or storage, how Derrich mentioned, how would you prevent a user from, dragging that to the local hard drive and therefore possibly, spilling information? But I know how Prevail works, so I wouldn't get that deep into it. So just make sure if you have a tool that's, has a share inside your computer that you can't move stuff out of it, you can't download locally. That's a big thing where they get you.
And I would venture to say, yes, Prevail helps with that for sure. I would also recommend people utilize data loss prevention tools in addition to Prevail, quite frankly. I mean, I think that you can have policy and procedure around it to protect you utilizing a tool like Prevail, but I would strongly recommend utilizing DLP in addition.
Exactly.
Yeah, so data labeling and data loss protection is very important. I mean, in the DoD right now, in the DIB, we're starting to move further and further towards. And I don't particularly agree with putting the onus on a user, but when we're managing data in our environment, now we have controls and tools in place where we have to actually classify what it is before. And once it's classified, like if it's restricted, then the system won't allow it to go out via email if it's labeled. And so it's kind of a plus and minus. It kind of, puts the onus on the employee to be able to classify the documents and things that they're moving around. But once it's classified, then they can use automated systems to see where that data is, who's trying to move that data.
And in Prevail, it's important to remember there's a setting in which Prevail's desktop environment works very similarly to like a OneDrive or a Google Drive that a lot of people might be familiar with. But you can, as an administrator, disallow desktop access, meaning there's no desktop sync. And this resolves the question that Alex posed about data loss prevention, because you can only log into the Prevail portal, which is certificate-based control, and then look at it, view it really in that Prevail environment. And so you can turn off desktop sync for all users except for the trusted 2-3 users who need to be working on that project at this given time, provide them local access, utilize your DLP rules, and then take away that local access when they're no longer working on the project.
Okay. I'll try to make this one real quick. Speaking of DLP, data loss prevention, it kind of brings us into this section. We're going to talk about how to control public information being exposed as far as FCI. Can you take through like what steps do you use to prevent FCI from being posted publicly?
Alan, I'm going to pitch this one to you.
So I would say data classification, data segmentation, making sure that the rules are in place, and data controls are in place, and policies are in place to make sure that users understand categorization of the data, and employee training, procedures to ensure FCI is not posted or processed publicly accessible. We try to use some automated controls for data labeling and data loss.
Yeah. Administratively, we also have our IT committee that Alan's on, that I'm on, that Derrich is also on. And so we meet on a regular basis, and anything that would be up for public posting on a LinkedIn or a website or whatever gets reviewed in our bi-weekly IT committee meetings and approved by that committee. If something were to get posted on a public forum, have an incident response policy that indicates what we would do and how the actions we would take. If it were posted on a platform that we didn't have control over, we would do our very best to get it taken down with regards to either contacting that company or the individual who might have posted it accidentally before we would escalate it to CISA, which we hope we wouldn't have to do. And I personally also have Google alerts for our company name. So I receive a notice every morning about mentions of our company. So while that's not a fail-proof, it is certainly helpful for me to see if anything got posted about the organization on a daily basis.
Yeah, I would also go back to data separation and making sure that your network diagram articulates how you're actually separating those publicly facing websites if you've got them from your internal sites, and making sure that those pathways are very distinct. You can prevent that type of crossover or spill.
Right now, I'm just showing a sample data flow diagram or network diagram to kind of give you a visual of Prevail. So we have the Prevail here, which is hosted on AWS Gov Cloud, which AWS Gov Cloud, I believe, is FedRAMP High. And it's showing that end-to-end encryption, the laptops that have access to Prevail, but the Microsoft 365 is separate. You see this dotted line representing that segmentation. So there is no spillage between these two environments and have the firewall, but a real simple network diagram for y'all to kind of have a visual of what we're discussing.
Okay, so, and Derrich, you did answer the question. I saw someone post a question about Outlook mail encryption, and that was let's see, Outlook, Michelle Sora. If this were CUI, we're talking about storing, processing, and transmitting the data in a FIPS 140-2 validated encryption module. And so regardless of the encryption that you might or not might be able to apply from the local Outlook application, that's not going to help you if you're processing or storing the data in a commercial 365 environment, which is where Prevail comes in to be very helpful in that scenario.
So I'm going to go ahead and open up the poll right now, or since we completed the access control domain, to get the audience feedback on what your thoughts in terms. How did Evan and Alan do on that first domain? Are they off to a good start or not? Let's see. Look like we have a lot of yeses. A couple more moments as we get ready to go into the second domain. There's a lot of overlap between access control and identification and authentication. So Alice, you can decide if there's any follow-up questions you need to satisfy these requirements. But I know there's a lot of overlap that maybe Evan already answered.
Yes. Just to wrap up that other domain for sure, the posted stuff, they answered all the questions. I would probably just ask for a policy showing about the weekly meetings, how they actually decide. I'm sure they have that. And they write it down. This is how we handle it and have the process. So they covered that. As far as the next control, the IA, yes, it overlaps a lot with the AC domain. So we're talking about systems are identified, processes are identified, devices. We've already discussed that in the AC. So typically an assessor will take note from the AC and the IA at the same time. And just, if they have any extra questions, they'll follow up on that. But we definitely have 351A through C is covered. I'll look at the 352, identity of each user is authenticated and verified as a prerequisite to the system. They already said they had authorized users that only have access to the system. So that was answered as well as the processes. So in my opinion, all of the IA has been already answered in their type of environment. I'll probably dig a little bit deeper if they weren't using Prevail, but I know how everything just pretty much in there. If there's any other questions or if anybody want to add any comments, I can hold on till we go to the next.
Yep. And while we see if anything else is in the chat, this one. So see, we kind of touched on these yesterday as far as being able to identify devices accessing the system. And then not only identifying them, now you need to be able to also show that you're authenticating or verifying those devices as a prereq. So this is where it can become challenging as your organization is allowing BYOD in your environment to access your system. Are you authenticating those devices? How are you identifying those devices? So if Bob or Sally can just access your in-scope system that is processing, storing, or transmitting FCI from any device, then likely you're not properly identifying those devices as a prereq for having access to that system.
Yeah. And, there's more than one way to achieve that goal. You can achieve it with like an agent that has to do with like a cloud-based security firewall or a single sign-on solution. I mean, there's lots of ways to achieve it, but the reason I like certificate is you can make it one-to-one. You can get that certificate installed on the machine before you deploy it out, and it's like there's no questions about it. Like the only way that anybody's gaining access is if they're on a machine that has that certificate. And if you make it a one-to-one relationship, it's a pretty bulletproof solution, knock on wood.
Yeah. So since there was so much overlap with access control and IA, and based on the poll, like the audience think you did a good job on access control, I don't think we need a separate poll for IA. Let's jump into media protection.
All right. Do you guys have a method for sanitizing and destroying FCI before it's disposed?
Do you want to speak to that, Alan, or would you like me to?
I would prefer you did.
Okay, you got it. Cool. So for data within the Prevail environment, this kind of harkens back to what we spoke about yesterday in the cloud-based Google environment. So we leverage Prevail to delete the data, and we are comfortable with their policies, procedures, and their FedRAMP moderate equivalency. On a local workstation, we do utilize a platform called Blanco to completely wipe the devices. But even so, the minute that you invalidate the certificate of Prevail on that workstation, it is effectively wiped because it's impossible to get the data on that machine, even if it were stored locally, without the associated active certificate. So the way that we do it, our policy and procedure is to revoke the certificate from Prevail and then also wipe the laptop that the person was connected to via Blanco.
Excellent. So he would have that process as some sort of policy procedure, and he would just show me that. And also, one thing I did mention, since he used Prevail, I would use a shared responsibility matrix that covers all the controls that Prevail is in charge of handling. And so when he speaks to it, okay, well, they are doing it. They are FedRAMP already compliant, so it's inherited by default. So
I've actually, you don't see it, but I've got my shared responsibility matrix for Prevail up on my screen over here.
Okay.
And for the attendees tomorrow, we'll compile all the resources. And one of the resources you're going to receive is going to be a sample system security plan for Allen Evans systems. So they're going to list the different tools they use to satisfy each assessment objective. The list is not exhaustive, but at least you'll have a starting point. You get a feel of different tools that may be available.
Okay.
Yes. And it's being recorded as well. So Amanda will share that with attendees as well. All right. So let me open up the poll for the media protection domain. See how you did, Alan and Evan. See if you're keeping your streak going. So far, the yeses are leading. You've satisfied the requirements. We do have one no. We have two no's. Right. So you have to work a little harder. And for those of you who said no, feel free to comment in the chat what you wanted to see as far as response or what type of evidence would you expect, and share any insights on why you feel that requirement wasn't met. And we have 5% that's unsure. All right. But overall, yes. So let's go ahead and close that poll.
Yeah. So just to the audience, if you have a process of how you actually do it, and then you can show that it's written down and maybe have like dates when you destroyed it, maybe like a log or something like that, you could probably ensure that you won't have any issues. So it's all about having a process and proof that you do it or you plan on doing it, something like that. Yeah, just a tip.
Absolutely. And so Evan does have to drop off at the top of the hour, so we're going to skip over physical security, physical protection right now. Alan's going to cover those. And let's go to system and communications protection. There's a lot of overlap from access control domain still here with the like that firewall function, but let's talk to this one more.
Right. I asked a general question, probably kill a lot of birds, and you probably already answered it. Do you, no, this is talking about public again, so never mind. Let me go back. No, the external boundary is defined. So is your external boundary defined? And how would you show me that?
We would show you our boundary diagram. So in a real scenario, we would show him our boundary diagram. We would also, which would visually define our external boundaries. We would also, I think, would be beneficial to show him our firewall and our network diagram, which is automatically generated by the firewall, just to demonstrate where our VLANs are, to validate what we're saying that is represented in our boundary diagram. And Alan, I know that you had some notes on the firewall. I don't know if you want to say anything about it now, but if you'd like to, you certainly can.
Yeah, I don't have those pulled up right now, but no, I'm good.
Okay.
Another general question. How do you confirm continuous enforcement?
Of which particular piece?
Just that you're limiting any controls from your boundary from things getting inside.
So with regards to accessing our FCI environment, I think we've talked about that at length. And the FCI environment, again, is our Prevail environment. So the only way to gain access to that environment from outside is having had an administrator manually install a one-to-one based certificate on that device. And so we continuously monitor that by making sure that our alerts are set up on the platform to notify us if any new devices have been added. And we have a small administrative team. And so if a new device has been added that our administrative team did not add, we can easily revoke access to that. With regards to our local environment, we also have alerts set up on our firewall, and we run maintenance on the firewall as well. So we would either receive an alert for any kind of anomalous activity from an external connection, or we would discover it by looking at our log and our maintenance, which we do bi-weekly.
So he would show me the logs and the settings on the systems and a firewall pretty much in the network diagram. That would cover a lot of that. So that would bring me to as far as monitoring, which, we kind of talked about that, but how do you monitor communications on the external boundary?
So we monitor communications on the external boundary by doing the firewall logging and reviewing, as well as the reviewing of the Prevail environment. Our environment is small enough that we utilize email notifications and log review from our wider group, and we use a internalized SIM. Just as an aside to other people here, as you go towards level 2, having an integrated log aggregation solution with a security incident and event management service and a security operations center with a managed detection and response team is of benefit as you move beyond what we're talking about here, but just something to keep in mind, because there's a lot of questions on other elements of level 2 about maintenance and log aggregation and log reduction and whether you're looking at the logs and all that stuff.
Excellent. All right. So we talk about external boundaries. How do you monitor internal boundaries?
That has to do with our VLANs. And so on the inside of our environment, we have our managed switches defining those VLANs. And so any kind of lateral traffic, we're all lateral, meaning from one VLAN to another VLAN inside our environment. We're also monitoring and alerting upon that.
Perfect. And so we would get a log of him, pretty much showing how they do it. Like, we would ask for that. And it shouldn't be hard when you just log into the device, pull up the logs, and be like, okay, good.
Alex, can Can you click on one of those again, just because, or Derrich, maybe, can you click on one of these objectives? You showed something that I wanted to share with the wider group, which was all the further discussion and everything like that. So this information is pulled from the assessment guide, which is readily available and probably a resource we'll share with you tomorrow that is on the DO website. It's a PDF that tells you a version of how to achieve these objectives in really plain English. And so, all four of us on this panel have read this document once, twice, 5 times. But if you haven't seen this document before and you don't know how to answer a question or an objective, it's right here. The examples and the further discussion are right here for a version, not the only version, but a version of how you can achieve the goal. So I saw this come up and I wanted to make sure people knew it's a free resource available to you right now.
The answers to the test, right?
Basically, yeah, the answers to the test right here. And you better believe that the assessor is using that. So if you give the answer that's on the assessment guide, it makes your life a lot easier. It has to be true, but just as
I would also caution too, and this is from the classified side of the house doing assessments. People like to cut and paste. So if you're going to use that as a guide, make sure that it's applicable to your environment. You can't say that you're doing something just because it's the right answer, because your environment might be unique and you may have to do something a little different. But it is definitely a good roadmap.
Yeah. And I put the link in the chat to the DoD CMMC resources and documentation. So that's the authoritative website where you get all the most up-to-date guides and scoping guides, all the resources you need for CMMC, and directly at the DoD website. So that's in the chat right now. But tomorrow, with all of the resources we're going to be sharing with y'all, we will compile like one sheet with all of the different links that you can readily have access to, in addition to the various templates, sample policies, procedures, and everything that's relevant for CMMC Level 1.
Yes. And there's another one that's not as authoritative, but it's real deep into examples. And it's the 162. A lot of people aren't even aware of that one. So just another tip for you guys. Right. Yeah. And the 3.3.1, I believe, still.
Are we now on the public access system? Have we covered that one already?
I don't think so. I'm still on the communications. I was on 13. Well, we did E, but so I'm going to kind of just wrap all three into like maybe one question.
We sort of talked about all three, the monitoring and the controlling, I think. Well, you're the assessor.
Yeah, we definitely talked about the monitoring, protecting. We did cover that all in one because it has a firewalls to protect it and control. So let's move into the public. All right. Publicly accessible system components are identified. How do you identify, and do you have some sort of list of that?
We do have a list. So any of our assets being people, process, technology, there's a whole asset guide that we've got in our SSP for you, but any of our assets that are publicly accessible are identified in that asset list. And the only publicly accessible asset, if you can even call it publicly accessible, is Prevail. And the reason I say that is because it is accessible from the internet, but only from a person who has a certificate installed on their workstation.
Excellent. Right, subnetworks. Okay, this one says subnetworks or publicly accessible system components are physically or logically separated from internal networks. How do you guys pretty much separate those types of networks?
Again, they're not publicly available, but within our office, we utilize VLANs to logically separate our networks.
Perfect. All right. So you're gonna get sometimes those repetitive questions. If you already answered it, don't get frustrated. Just answer like a robot.
Yeah.
You'd be good. Yep. All right. We're going to move into the S.
Yes, move
All
that.
right. This one asks about the time within which you identify system flaws is specified. So how do you have a time frame you identify any system flaws? How do you do that?
At least for the purposes of this conversation, you've got 2 areas to talk about. You've got our local environment hardware and system flaws might be on our workstations or the networking gear we've talked about. And then you've also got the Prevail environment. So the Prevail environment's easy because that's inherited from Prevail. They run regular maintenance on their systems. From our perspective, on our Windows workstations, we've got them set to do our patch Mondays, and that's automated. So we're remediating any kind of Windows updates that need to be occurring. on Patch Mondays. And then for our firewalls, those also automatically receive firmware and software updates, which we check in our maintenance cycle.
Perfect. So that's a patch question for you guys. Some sort of schedule you want to show, and then you want to show that it's actually running, and that should cover that as well. And that actually covers A and B. And now we can get to C. So if there is a flaw found, on the time in which you report those.
We've actually got, as a part of our incident response plan, a level of criticality. So the answer, big picture is, it's in our incident response plan, which our staff is required to read and review. And then it has to do with level of criticality. And this could be a flaw related to their workstation, or it could be related to an incident or a data spill. And we've got a set time for each level of intensity for reporting these things to their manager or a part of the IT committee.
One of the things I would add in here too, you, Alex, is we do an internal IT assessment of vulnerabilities, patches, and testing to make sure that they're actually applicable for our system. Because some things can be deprecated if they don't apply to our environment. So just because it pops out as a critical or level 1, it has to be assessed against the environment to see if it really is something that we should be addressing immediately as a critical flaw. Is it something that's not applicable to us, or something that we've mitigated, put a compensating control in place for?
Excellent. So in that situation, we would ask for the policies and procedures that show that. And since Alan got in too deep, I'll be like, okay, let me see that policy.
See, and that's a good point, right? And I've had this happen on the classified side. If you give more than was asked, then you have to be ready to support it. So that's definitely okay.
Yeah,
So,
I would say one of my weaknesses is that I'm verbose and I just keep on talking. I think it's important to be brief and just answer the question that was asked of you.
It's the key to all of this is really just having your answers already done and just having those artifacts already ready to show the screenshots. And once you do that, just read what you said and just be quiet and see what happens from there. And you'll be okay. Preparation, really. Let's see. We're down to 14.2, I believe. Yeah. So this one says designated locations for malicious code protections are identified. So when it has to malicious code, how do you identify the designations?
So the locations would be anywhere that we're storing, processing, transmitting FCI. In this case, it has to do with Prevail, and they run their scans locally and regularly in their environment. And because some people are processing, storing, transmitting on their laptops, we also utilize Sentinel-1 running in real time on those workstations.
So I'll just ask for him to show me the log of that or the setting that show that it's turned on. And that would satisfy me on that one. Protection from malicious codes we just kind of answered that same one, are provided. You would show me that. We could move into, this one says malicious code protection mechanisms are updated when a new release is available. So do you have the latest release, and how do you go about doing that?
That's automatic, but we also check to make sure it deployed correctly during our biweekly maintenance cycle.
Okay. So I'll just check to show me a screenshot that automatic updates are turned on, and maybe a log of the last time, and that will satisfy an assessor on that. 2 screenshots are always better than 1. Let's see. This one here.
I kind of want to talk about A and B here, because a lot of the new EDR, MDR solutions will have like behavioral based AI response. And these questions are often related to like relatively not deprecated, but older versions of antivirus that did run like a daily scan or something. So I think it's just important for you as the organization seeking assessment to really clearly understand how your tool works and to be able to explain it clearly, because some of them don't do a regular scan anymore. Like Sentinel-1, for example, scans your machine when you first install it, and then it's sort of always on. It's always watching.
Real time. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's important to understand that for CMMC, it's aligned with the revision 2 for NIST 800-171.
Yeah.
There is an updated version, revision 3 out, which probably factors in a lot more of the updated technology. The revision 2, I believe, was first published in like 2015, 17. It's been quite a while.
Exactly.
Right. Well, I know, Evan, you have to leave us momentarily. We still have one more domain on the physical security. Alan's going to bring it home for you there. Any parting words or insights, advice you want to share, Evan, before you leave?
Be prepared. Be aware that the assessor is basically on your team, and work collaboratively. with your cohorts and your colleagues. And Prevail's cool, just as an FYI. I like Prevail. So I'll be back tomorrow if you guys have targeted questions about anything that I spoke about today. And thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Evan. And again, tomorrow we'll explore multiple various solutions that are available. I mean, for level one, you don't have to have an enclave, but we'll explore the pros and cons of various solutions. But definitely Prevail is one. Yesterday we covered Google Workspace. We'll look at close probably at Microsoft tomorrow as well.
Yeah, I guess something I think we should do maybe tomorrow is talk about what you don't need in level one, because I think that all of us are so focused on high security environments that like we're not even talking about that you don't really need MFA. You should have MFA, but like
Right.
It's not required
For level one.
So maybe we can chat about that a little bit.
Definitely. That question came up in the chat.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, Evan, thank you. And I see Elvis had asked about how much evidence is required to be generated, how long should it be kept. So yesterday we covered that the evidence in the artifact should be kept for 6 years. However, for level one, when you go into Spurs to submit your attestation, it's only giving you an option to say essentially if all 15 requirements are met or not met. You don't have an option to upload any attachments for evidence. That's not required for level one. However, if something happens and DoD has to audit you, and you said you're tested to be in compliance with level one, however, they come do an audit on you for whatever reason, and you don't have any evidence, you don't have any documentation, it's going to be pretty hard to sell that you did a comprehensive level one self-assessment without having any evidence, without having any documentation. So for organizations that bring in Aspire Cyber to do the level one self-assessment, upon finishing that self-assessment, we provide them with the letter of attestation saying that we reviewed their environment, the evidence, and we, based on our professional opinion, that they are in compliance. But we will not give them that letter of attestation if they don't have documentation, if they don't have a network diagram, they don't have policies and procedures, or at least screenshots to support that they're actually doing what the requirements say they have to do. But not just going to take your word for it, have to verify. Alan, Alex, anything else you want to add to that?
Only thing I'll just say is I kind of want to track back to we don't have to change the screen or anything, but just to conclude that SI family, the main thing is just showing your logs. If you have like an antivirus or something like that, show the settings that it's already set. Even though he was talking about Sentinel-1, a lot of people still use their basic, antivirus where it runs every week or once a day. Just be ready to show that. Just show antivirus or some sort of things working like that, and you'll be okay. And
when I overlay what we do on a classified side, when our assessors come out, they're looking, they really want to see on the system. I think it's one thing to have nice, pretty binders that have papers and things in there that can that talk about compliance. But if you can actually have a system administrator in your organization going shoulder to shoulder, showing them on the system where these things are actually set in configurations of where the logs are, and looking through the logs, that kind of enhances the confidence of the assessor. At least that in my experience.
Yeah, that really helps.
All right, Alan, ready for you to bring us home with the physical protections.
Let me have it, Alex.
Right.
No mercy on them.
Do you have a list of authorized users and to access FCI? And if those with those users, how do they access FCI?
Well, so we maintain an access control list of FCI for the FCI segment that includes only cleared trained personnel. The list is reviewed quarterly by management to ensure accuracy. So we can provide the current access lists and a quarterly review log.
Oh, excellent. So Alan would go ahead and give me that list of users. He would show me their training process that they use, that they sign off on it, and that maybe somebody from management has to sign off on as well. And that should be good. Let's see.
Would you, and just from an assessor standpoint, I know I'm supposed to not ask questions because I get induced more, but would assessors in this instance actually interview employees to kind of corroborate?
Oh yeah, you like to do sampling, especially if it's a bigger company. You'll just get a random person, but usually you'll have whoever's going to talk before already and lined up for the assessor. But you would definitely want to talk to employees as well if you can, especially in a bigger company. So, good question. Got to be ready. Train your guys. All right, we're moving to this one asks physical access to organizational systems is limited to authorized individuals. So how do you limit physical access to only authorized individuals?
So kind of like role-based access for users, and then only individuals that are on authorized lists can enter the FCI area, where systems are processing FCI. And entry is controlled through key card access from a physical standpoint. There's a badge system log, and then there's access control policies. So we could show you the access control policy that would outline the administrative controls in place to control that access.
Nice. Definitely a badging system. I think Elvis had a question in there somewhere. What that said, I saw a question. Can a panel recommend starting?
Yeah, I see the one from Elvis around about the receptionist. Yeah, definitely the receptionist is fair game for an assessment because they are likely going to be the one that's enforcing this policy of requiring visitors to sign in and things like that. So yeah, they are one of the stakeholders who would be on the list that as an assessor I would want to talk to.
Exactly. Good question. Right. Now, this one's asking physical access to equipment is limited to authorized individuals. So when it comes to equipment, how do you limit only authorized individuals?
So servers and workstations and then networking in the FCI areas are secured and locked cabinets or rooms, and access is restricted to an authorized staff. So again, going back to the access control list and who's got permissions to be in those areas. Some of the evidence would be some photos or locked cabinets or walking them through and showing an area or equipment access logs. Another point there too is your physical environment weighs heavily on how you get assessed. So if you're walking assessors through your area and it looks bad, that's probably not a good thing. But anyway, that was one of the answers I had.
Right.
What am I missing, Alex?
No, you guys have it locked down pretty hard. We can move into, I'm gonna ask both of these at the same time, A and B, which is, are visitors escorted and monitored and actively monitored?
Yeah, so all visitors are signed in at the reception desk, and they're issued a visitor badge, and they're escorted at all times in the FCI area. So again, evidence there would be the visitor log. Visitor log to the escort policy documents would be the artifacts that demonstrate that. So visitor activity is monitored visually by their escort where applicable, or by CCTV systems that we have in the area. And so we have CCTV coverage maps that kind of define the physical areas where those cameras are, and escort logs, notes to corroborate that movement.
So I'll probably have him show me, just access logs, recent, make sure it's not like from 5 years ago, an old clipboard with dust on it. Something like that.
Right.
So he would show me that. He pretty much answered the next question because he says the logs are there. So that automatically covers the next one. So we'll just kind of jump down to physical access to devices are identified and controlled. So how do you control that access to physical devices?
So that comes down to having a defined inventory, asset inventory, and having a review and an audit periodically to ensure that those devices are still accurately accounted for.
Okay, so we would look at that. And this last one, as far as if they're how they manage it. Let's say somebody loses a laptop, and it may get somebody tries to get into it. How would you protect that?
Well, the devices, if it's a laptop, you should have something like a BitLocker on there, so it's encrypted. So if someone else got a hold of it without the BitLocker key, would be useless to them. And then you'd also go through the loss device reporting policy, which we have to show you that talks about what is remediation, making sure that you confirm that it's actually enabled and that the device is dispositioned in organizational
So I'll probably get like a procedure for that. And if you guys have phones out there, one, I would get a company phone. But if you do have it to where you can possibly remote wipe it or something like that, that's more higher level. But yeah, I would just get a separate phone if you can, start from scratch and make sure you can wipe it. And other than that, I mean, those are all the questions I have pending any more from the audience.
Yeah, let's see. I've opened up the poll. Let's see how you did, Alan. kept the streak going. And,
Well, I don't know. Elvis is out there asking questions.
and while people complete the poll, I see Alex Evan put in a comment in the chat related to having seen an assessment where the home office of the owner was in scope. That's very possible because ultimately, as I mentioned yesterday, CMMC is an information-centric framework. So if, let's say, example, you're the owner of a company and that small business, you work out your home office and you're printing FCI, then that's putting your home office in scope. Or more so is in relation to like an assessment, certification assessment at level 2. If you're printing that CUI, that's the first thing the assessor wants to know. Where are you printing CUI? Where is it stored? If it's stored at your home office in the file cabinet, you prepare for that assessor to come to your home to verify that you have those physical security controls in place. That's another benefit. Go ahead, Alan. I
was going to ask, in your experience, I mean, you've done these assessments. Have you had instances where you've had people that fall into that category?
I personally haven't had that yet. I just know it is possible. And I haven't necessarily talked to an assessor who's done it yet either. But so, Elvis, if you can put in the chat, you mentioned you witnessed that on an assessment. Was that a self-assessment? Was that a actual CMMC assessment, or was just a DoD DIPCAC assessment? So I was curious about that. But certainly during that intake, and Alice, you can speak to this in terms of being a candidate C3PO. Once you're doing that intake on a prospective client who's going to be employing your services for a level 2 certification assessment, how would you handle that if they say they have physicals at their home office?
Man, well, I've heard that a good way is taking pictures of your, kind of showing that you're in a safe, that you have the safe, that you have the right labels, something like that. Because let's say there's multiple people, maybe do samples of asking for evidence. You may pop up on one person, but me personally, I would just kind of make sure you have some sort of either pictures of it or something like that showing that you properly maintain it, and still have a policy in place for the company to accept that risk, and probably in some sort of risk management type repository saying, hey, we accept the risk and this is how we handle it. I'll probably let that slide.
Yeah, and that kind of highlights that it may be at the C3PO's discretion. Right. But I do know C3PO. I was on a interview call with a C3PO for one of my clients, and they didn't even have CUI in scope. Well, no physical CUI, but the C3PO was saying that since that home office is linked to their cage code, that they would still need to show up on site at their home to do the physical security assessment. I've heard mixed views on that. So I don't think that's really fully, it's mixed on that. However, that just highlights in terms of it's so important to scoping, and you want to reduce your scope as much as possible, especially when it comes to level 2 and CUI. So if you can keep that CUI in a cloud environment or digital and not have physical CUI, then that's going to make your lives a lot easier. I have to work out somebody at your home, assessors snooping around your home, eating your food, drinking your coffee.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point, especially for small businesses. And some small businesses don't have, brick and mortar offices, right? So, or they have very limited office. Yeah, definitely if you keep it in the cloud, that'd be the optimal way to go.
All right. So as far as the poll results, Alan, we had a majority of yes, you met the requirements. So it looks like Alan Evans Systems, Aspire Cyber, we're going to be able to give you all a letter of attestation, which is just an added bonus that potentially you can share with your primes, or in the event you're ever audited at a DoD, you have that available. What the next steps for you will be to go into Spurs, which is through Pi. You should have access to that, and you will be able to submit your self-attestation for level 1. Yeah, so let me stop sharing my screen, and now we have more time today for questions. Well, we 15 minutes for questions. We're looking in the chat, and Amanda, Nicole, if you all have anything you want to add, or that's kind of what it looks like to do a level 1 self-assessment. So it's not easy. It's not terribly difficult in comparison to level 2, but you have to really have someone who know what they're doing and asking the right questions and making sure that you all have the right artifacts, and you're saving those artifacts for up to 6 years, because It's nothing trivial to submit a self-attestation in SPURS saying, yes, we are in compliance with our contractual requirements for CMMC level 1, and you're not. You don't really want to play around with that. So it can have some consequences you don't want to deal with. They help you avoid years. So let's see. I'm looking in the chat, see if I have any questions. And while I do that, anything else y'all want to add, Alex, Alan? Level 1.
This is stressful. I would say, Alex, yeah, going through an assessment, this is stressful. Even in a mock assessment, right? We have fun here, but this is, like Derrich says, this isn't to be taken lightly. And even at a level 1, if you miss one of those, scuttle your level 1. So definitely have to take it serious.
Because one objective inside of control, the whole objective is gone. And just take note that there doesn't have to be in order. You may have, like how Evan had to leave, you may just have to schedule certain people around certain times, and the assessor may even want to do it in different order. So you never know which way it's going to come. So just be ready.
Yeah, I'm looking in the chat. I see Nikhil, hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Says, is there a database of who has their CMMC? If I wanted to prospect for subs that already meet the level 1 or level 2 requirements. So there's a database. It's in basically EMAS, but only people that have access to it as the contractors. The contracting officers for DoD. So the primes don't have access to it. Only the DoD contracting officers. So essentially, it'll be up to you if you're prospecting for subs who already have level 1 or level 2, especially level 2. If they're claiming that they're level 2 certified, they'll be able to share their certification with you. It's based like a PDF that is have their certification, they have the CGPO that assess them. That's going to be the best way to validate. But when it comes to the solicitations, we'll have the CMMC clause in it. Essentially, the contracting officers, they'll be able to check in that system in EMAS and determine if that company has their certification or not, or if they have already submitted their level 1 self-attestation.
I forgot the lady's name. She's part of Summit 7 with the glasses, blonde hair. She's supposed to be starting some sort of website where they're going to start listing people. I don't know if it's up yet, but just pay it. There should eventually be some sort of just side group where they're going to start listing people.
Yeah,
so we'll keep you posted on that.
And typically, organizations who have gotten their CMMC level 2 certification, they proudly broadcast that and share it. Well, I can't remember the number right now, but I know they shared that number at the Cyber AB Town Hall either last month or 2 months ago, as far as the number of companies who have been certified to date for level 2. Let's see, Nish, you put together a quick start guide. Can you say DFAR 7012 quick start guide? I do actually, I think they are working on that. I contacted Nish, it's been a few months. I need to check and see where they are on that. But yeah, I agree. A quick start guide will be helpful because they have one for the NIST cybersecurity framework quick start guide. I'm a big fan of that. I think they are working on one for essentially 80171. Let's see, is there qualifying assessment? Just looking back through the questions. But while I do that, yeah, feel free to put your questions in the chat. Any more you have, we're looking at it. Let's see. Other than that, again, tomorrow is really going to, we demonstrated what a self-assessment looks like, the level of rigor. Yesterday, we showed kind of more examples of artifacts that Alex was showing from his real company. But today, we kind of talked more about what those artifacts would be. Tomorrow is going to be really focused on talking about the different solutions. There's so many solutions, a lot of confusing information out there. We're going to try to clarify as much as possible, because it really, you can waste a lot of money trying to get CMMC compliant, things, tools, technology, consulting that you don't need, or potentially trying to do it in-house. You actually do need consulting. There's a lot of different ways you can approach CMMC, starting with understanding your contractual requirements. That's a good place to start. If you're currently a DoD contractor, look at your contract. See what clauses you have in that contract. Ones you're looking for is like that FAR 21 clause, that DFAR 7012, 7019, 7020. All those are going to be indicators that you have cybersecurity requirements that today, that not once CMMC is final. CMMC is just going to validate, really just that verification program. You have just contractual requirements today if you're a DoD contractor. That's the best place to start. From there, once you identify a contract that has those clauses in it, or if you are not a contractor yet, you anticipate becoming a DoD contractor, sub, and think about, okay, what type of services are you going to offer DoD? Who's going to be involved? What system are you going to use? It's a lot simpler at level 1, but level 2, it's critical to know what system you're using. Are you using a compliance system? DFARS, we're going to look at that tomorrow, the DFARS 7012, but it requires that FedRAMP moderate. So if you say, I want to be a defense contractor, I'm going to continue using my Microsoft 365 commercial environment to store, process, or transmit CUI, remember, controlled unclassified information, that's a no-go. That is, you're not compliant at that point just by using that system that's not compliant because it's not FedRAMP.
Yeah, that's an interesting question from David. Is there an overlap with ITAR compliance?
I'm not that familiar with ITAR. Clients that have ITAR, we typically consult with the ITAR attorney because that can get really complex. But I would say there is overlap because really ITAR relates to, it's basically managed by the State Department, but it has to do with like residency requirements. So that information where you can't share the information outside the U.S. without approval from the State Department, you can't have non-U.S. persons accessing that information. So it gets really complex from a legal standpoint. But what's similar with DoD, you have export control information, which is it's a category of CUI and a lot of the same requirements around residents, non-foreign persons, and things like that. So in regard from a technical standpoint, usually if you're in one of those government cloud solutions or Google Workspace, and you can talk to this one, Alex, about assured controls. But yeah, there are additional requirements that comes with ITAR and export control. You absolutely want to make sure you understand those requirements because, yes, lots of people have gone to prison for mishandling ITAR systems.
Exactly. I want that. That's why people go with the Azure government in the first place, or AWS government, or Google assured controls or assured workloads, because it makes sure that the people who are accessing that cloud environment, whether it be Microsoft, Google, or AWS, are U.S. citizens. They've had background checks. So that covers you as far as who's touching your data. And there is a lot of controls that do overlap when it comes to ITAR, like your personnel that you screen, the background checks, change management, encrypting certain data, just protecting the right people from accessing. It kind of all ties together. And a lot of controls and all types of regulations are going to kind of tie into a lot of NIST controls anyway, especially when they're 71s. When you're complying with that, you can probably check boxes for a lot of other ones in the maintenance. So be ready.
Absolutely. And kind of touched on this yesterday with Google Cloud, how they designed their data centers to all essentially be able to support assured controls and ITAR. So it's not like a migration. Let's say you have Google Workspace, you can upgrade to that assured controls and you don't have to migrate or separate email or anything like this. It's pretty seamless versus if you're in Microsoft 365 commercial and you need to go to GCC High, that's a full migration. That's a new email, new Azure directory, and it's on the select data centers. It can be pretty painful and costly. Any other questions in the chat? Goal, again, these first 2 days is kind of demonstrate what it looks like, what it feels like, and again, talk about the requirements all day and you still not understand them. We wanted to give you all practical examples of how to satisfy the requirements, especially as a small business. And then tomorrow, our goal is to save you as much time and money as possible, as far as having a good baseline knowledge of the available solutions, what you need, what you don't need, trustworthy sources, whether free or paid. We're going to explore that a lot, and then just making sure you have an understanding of all of the resources and templates that we're going to be sharing. Hello, Lori. We see you again.
Hi. This was great. This was great. Having you guys here and, given the presentation on understanding this and actually taking us through a mock assessment, really, I was thinking about it. And as we're going through this and trying to understand it, really, for me, the bottom line is if, DOD, if I'm a small business and DOD asked me, to show proof of my CMMC level 1, that's, why we're here is because I want to be confident enough to say, yes, I do have it. So Thank you so much for providing this, and going through this because it kind of breaks it down. And I, not being a business owner, but knowing that DoD is requiring this, this is, something that is so important for everyone to understand, because I only see it filtering through all of the federal government at one point.
Absolutely. And thanks for inviting us. This is one of our favorite topics. We can talk about CMMC all day. The panelists. What I found frustrating early on in our CMMC journey is it's just so much information, so confusing, but there's very few people out there actually demonstrating it, how to do it. That's where the rubber meets the road. How do you actually do it? What does it look like for a small business? And a lot of the training focuses on level 2, but really level 1 is going to impact a lot more organizations than level 2, just because that's an existing requirement for all federal contractors, not just DoD. DoD is just essentially leading the charge where they're requiring like explicit attestation. For level 2, they're requiring certification. But understand, as a federal contractor, if you have that FAR clause, that FAR 21 clause in your contract, simply by signing that contract, by invoicing the federal government, you're saying you're in compliance. So that is something that you shouldn't take lightly on, to be able to provide these types of trainings and resources so that you are equipped and have that baseline knowledge, like Lori said, to be able to, if DoD comes knocking on your door, you can have that evidence to be confident and submit that attestation.
Well, I know there's several other chats that have popped up, and then I know somebody was raising their hand. I didn't catch that. Did you, Amanda?
No, I did not.
Oh, it's a couple I see. Let's see. Will you go into GCC High without a full migration? Laura mentioned. Not quite sure. Let's say. Yeah, I think I understand the question. So let's say you are currently using Microsoft 365 commercial, have a contract, DoD, it says you have to be in a Fed moderate environment. And at that point, you have the option, if you're looking at Microsoft, GCC or GCC High, but you kind of want to future-proof your business. Say, okay, maybe one day we're going to need to handling export controlled or ITAR or something like that. So let's go ahead and go with GCC High. You don't have to do a full migration. You're just going to have that enclave for just the in-scope information, that in-scope CUI. And then your non-DoD business or your FCI can remain in your Microsoft 365 commercial environment. So it doesn't have to be a full migration. But what your contract, that DFAR 712 is requiring, that you are safeguarding CUI in a FedRAMP moderate environment if you're leveraging cloud service. Of course, I understand GCC High is more secure, but don't know the difference from level 1 between GCC High or GCC. So I wouldn't necessarily say if it's more secure. It really just segmented data centers, and especially for GCC High, all those data centers are going to be in the United States. They're only going to be the Microsoft personnel supporting GCC High data centers. They're going to go through stricter background checks. They're also going to all be U.S. persons and other requirements that pertains to ITAR and export control and other things like that. It's still the same technology. It's just where those data centers are located and who's supporting those data centers, what comes into play.
Yeah, for level 1, you just, like you mentioned earlier yesterday, commercial I believe is okay for 1, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, and GCC High are more when you start getting towards level 2. But if you're handling ITAR, you want to get in GCC High. But it's good if you're going to play the GCC game, period. You might as well just go in a high, just so when you start winning these contracts, which you will, you'll already be prepared for new endeavors, and you don't have to move again.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really important point there, Alex, is because right now small businesses are like the lifeblood, right? And being able to be fluent in the C game and to be certified even at level 1 is the first step, right? Because you can't just keep giving everything to the bigs, because they're not as agile as smaller companies are. So I think that is, with the work that you, Derrich, and Alex and then the rest of CPN are doing is very, very valuable work, because a lot of people, that's Lori's point, are just now coming into this and don't understand what it means. They just know, I have this really cool technology and the government could really benefit from it, but then they run into the CMMC wall and they don't even know how to crack the nut. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's what's really important about the work that you're doing. That's what inspires me to keep coming back after again and again. So definitely great effort.
Awesome. And if we didn't answer your questions today, again, tomorrow, we're going to compile basically all of the questions and answers, get that to you hopefully by the end of the session tomorrow or just sometime this week. I will compile them. But I know we're at that time. Thank you all for everyone for your time. This was fun for me. Y'all enjoyed it.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today, all of the attendees. Thank you. Big thank you to our speakers.